Welcome back, everybody, to Dig on America, the podcast where we discuss socio-political issues, pop culture, politics, science, whatever it might be. And we look at these issues in a context of how it affects us today. Don't forget that Dig on America is 100% deep state propaganda and absolutely funded by George Soros, the Clinton Foundation, Jay-Z. And are we supported by Monty Burns?
I think it's Lex Luthor.
Oh, it's Lex Luthor. Well, that makes a lot of sense, Big Hussein. Big Hussein, what's happening? How are you? We just
And the brain also shoots us some money every once in a while too.
Pinky in the brain.
The brain, just not Pinky. The brain.
The brain shoots us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because he's trying to take over the world.
Look at the big brain on Brad.
Wow.
The metric system. That's right.
I believe you've met my fitness consigliere.
All right, guys. So we're back with Amber Rose Washington. For those of you who are seeing this video, we talked about incongruity with Amber Rose Washington on our last video. Yes, and we are now going to talk about another issue. We're going to start right with it now. Well, actually, if you guys want to spend a couple minutes afterwards, I'd like to kind of talk about Texas for a quick second. But before we get to that, let's get into our historical topic for the day. So now, as normal, I will read a little essay that I wrote, and I do have sources for this stuff. It will be in the show notes later. And I will read this off. And as I read it, my esteemed guests may ask me to pause so that we can discuss this. And if they don't participate, then I will be the mean social studies teacher and I will pause somewhere myself and call on them. And we will talk about this. So now let's get started with civil rights. Now, in my 8th grade social studies class, my teacher, Mr. Humble, who was quite the old fart, taught me some things.
Was he really humble though?
He was not humble. He had a huge red nose. It turns out that, after doing my own research, kind of like Ben Shapiro tells me to do, that what Mr. Humble told me wasn't always exactly the whole story. So we've learned that the modern civil rights era movement began with Rosa Parks, with freedom rides, and with Martin Luther King Jr. But it really started during World War II with efforts of men like A. Philip Randolph and the soldiers who took part in the Double V campaigns. But what is equally important to look at is the setting. So today, I'm not really going to talk so much about the actual civil rights movement itself, as I will about the setting in America that was disrupted and the reactions to these movements by blacks, women, and by gays. Now, after World War II, actually, we'll get Haas involved today as well. So after World War II, he gets to do some breathing. now, after World War II, the United States was riding high and had established itself as a true superpower, but also got to paint itself as the good guys. After all, they had just defeated a fascist and overtly racist Nazi regime, which kind of proves a little bit of a point. If the Nazis had just not been so honest about their quest for Aryan dominance and was just oppressing people instead of gassing them to death, they probably could have gotten away with it for decades to come. So we'll give you some proof on that here. Spend a little time learning about the black GIs returning home from the war. Big Haas, am I right or am I wrong?
100%.
Right. So, the Cold War began in the late 1940s and saw the infancy of the ongoing battle between democratic capitalism and, well, anything that is not democratic capitalism. This led to the 1950s, which has been called the period of consensus. Now, consensus, of course, meaning agreement between Americans, that political parties and news outlets and everything like that all really kind of said some version of the same thing. One thing is for sure, the rich and middle class white guys who dominated the decade all agree that the 1950s were pretty fucking awesome for rich and middle class white men. Now, the Cold War is really important here because in general, people were told we were the white hat wearing John Wayne good guy, and most people were hesitant to criticize the United States for anything for fear of being branded a communist and then shunned from polite society, if not denied their livelihood altogether. Thank you, the first Congressman McCarthy, or Senator McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy, no relation. Sorry, maybe slight distant cousin.
No relation.
Second, it was also true that this new widespread affluence meant that people didn't have to be critical of the country, because between the end of the war and 1960, that 15-year period, Americans experienced a period of economic expansion that saw standards of living rise to all-time highs. And the GNP actually doubled during that 15-year period. So America had seen some economic expansion in the past, but the 1950s were very different here. This time, the prosperity was shared by ordinary working people. Studies show that an estimate of 60% of Americans were defined as middle class and had access to things like television, air conditioning, indoor plumbing, and very importantly, more than one car. Cars were so important as the 1950s were not only the age of consensus, but easy access to transportation led to huge growth in suburbs. I thought you were going to jump all over that one there, Big Hussein. Now,
I'm letting you read, man.
Now, if you recall, the growing cities that we discussed just last week began to become heavily populated by immigrants and minorities. So these newly affluent car owners, almost exclusively white, spread out and moved to less congested areas.
Pause.
Thus, yes.
Fun fact. Do you know those interstates and things that they made to get out to the suburbs?
Yeah, they made them because they wanted to run.
They run them right.
Oh, go ahead.
Affluent black neighborhoods. They were running right.
Well, you know,
they would claim eminent domain, and they would plow right through the middle of an affluent black neighborhood, and then on either side of the expressway or the interstate, they would make whites only living and black only living on either side to separate the two.
You're exactly right. And you know, the reason why the interstates were so important was because they were looked at as a way, this was not part of the lesson, but they were looked at as a way to escape quickly when the Russians bombed us.
Oh, yeah. And you know something too, like
yes.
55, you can land
nuclear war
on 55. You can
it was they were afraid of nuclear war. The Red Scare, movies like The Red Menace and stuff like that were a big deal. Amber, were you about to say something?
No, I'm agreeing with you so far.
Give me some time.
Yeah.
So as I said, these mostly affluent car owners who were spread out and moved to the less congested areas. Thus, the number of homes in the United States happened to double, which created construction jobs and new businesses opportunities in restaurants, retail, and services. And of course, the boom of shopping malls, drive-in theaters, and diners. Now, Hollywood portrayals of this were really big too. And even music echoed this, Americana influence, leading to the real widespread celebrity worship and the idea that the American dream was broadcast to everyone by this fancy little thing called television. Now, the 1950s were indeed, to many, a golden age. And it is an era that a lot of people today, who are in their 70s and 80s, look back to as a very nostalgic area, a nostalgic time frame. Most people agreed, however, at the time on the American values. The American values were very, very fluid. Individualism, respect for private property, belief in equal opportunity, and of course, the fear of communists. There was a big problem, however, since we claimed to believe in equal opportunity, but we didn't actually provide it. This is why the modern civil rights movement can really be traced back to the late 40s, since it was hardly a period of expanding opportunities for minorities and even for women. Rigid segregation was the rule throughout the country, especially in housing, due to the effects of redlining, which we will dive into completely on another day, but also in jobs.
Hold on.
Yes.
In addition to redlining, you got to also think about what's it called? Covenants. The restrictive covenants where you couldn't resell to whites. You're on mute.
I was on
talking.
mute. Sorry.
That's why. But restrictive covenants and other forms of even government-backed segregation were the rule of the day back then too. I've been reading a book called The Color of Law that talks about a lot of the ways our federal, state, and local governments help, promote segregation and racism and the disenfranchisement of minorities throughout this country.
Absolutely. So continuing on here, as I mentioned, redlining, and again, we will talk about redlining in detail another day, but again, also in jobs. There was a lot of segregation as well. And remember, everyone really trusted and loved the government at this time. So in the South, public accommodations were segregated by law. But in the North, segregation was a lot more de facto. One example of this is a statistic cited by Eric Foner, who's a historian, showing that nearly 90% of suburban communities had a non-white population of less than 1%. Let me repeat that fact. 90% of suburban communities had non-white populations of less than 1%. Now, all of this was justified at the time by many due to the fact that many urban cities began to have immigrant and minority populations that self-segregated themselves into areas. Today, we know these places as the Italian areas of town, the black areas of town, Chinatown, Polish area, really Germantown. Actually, I'm deviating from this, but in a lot of cases it was. Italians, for example, purposely moved into places on their own because they wanted to keep that sense of community. In fact, there was examples of Italian families and Irish families, renting out entire apartment buildings and having every single person in that apartment building basically be Italian because they wanted to have that sense of community that they had enjoyed back in most of this happened in Manhattan. Or not Manhattan, but in New York. So that did happen. But a lot of the segregation obviously was not done was done for financial reasons because of things like redlining, where you had a lot of people, and again, I'm not reading here, I'm just talking, people who are still migrating, mostly African Americans migrating still from the South and getting up into the North and going to places where there were other blacks on one hand, but also where they could afford to go. Because as we know, if you're catering a community to 16% of the population, you're going to get less money for that place, which therefore devalues everything in that area. Well, but jumping back,
that was also a myth. And we'll talk about that. That's a whole rabbit hole. We'll go into that later.
All right. So we'll jump back into the read. So again, the South was segregated by law, the North more de facto. Somehow I got moved here. Okay, so again, we know all this from the Chinese areas, Latino areas, et cetera, that made doing business earlier. But a lot of white people use this as an excuse to say, hey, we're going to go start communities out in the suburbs because, of course, the problem is that English-speaking whites were threatened by the encroaching of different culture. And when they moved, whether intentionally or not, they took the opportunity and the money and the political power with them. In 1955, half of black families lived in poverty. Those that did get union jobs were given less seniority, so their employment was less stable. And most of all, their educational opportunities were limited by substandard segregated schools. For example, the Plessy versus Ferguson case ruling required that public facilities be separate but equal. And the most talked about example of this is the University of Texas, where the 3-classroom, no library university that was set up for black students was very different from the actual University of Texas. Now that brings us to the landmark case of Brown versus the Board of Education. Now, we will end really with Brown because it shows the cultures war going full scale. Brown was not about colleges. It was about public schools for children. Now, fun fact, Brown was actually a combination of 5 cases from 4 states, Brown just being the first alphabetically. So what I'm going to do here, and I did, and I neglected to mention when I mentioned the original heroes of civil rights, I mentioned Rosa Parks, I mentioned Martin Luther King. We don't want to forget that Latinos were very involved with this as well. Cesar Chavez was a huge force during this time as well, and I kind of just forgot to mention him. So I forgot about the Mexicans. I apologize. And then there were women's leaders as well, famous authors, Margaret Sanger, who I'm not a huge fan of in some ways, but I realized that she has some good contributions in other ways, was also a big piece of this pie. So what I'm going to do here real quick is I'm going to bring into this my buddy. I'm going to share my screen here so that he can read this. And I want Big Hussein here to read
A-E-I-O-U.
I'm just waiting for the screen to.
She sells seashells by the seashore.
Wow, you're good.
I was a speech comm major in college.
Good.
Minor in public relations. Oh no, focus on public relations. Minor in business administration because I switched from finance because business stats. People that went to Eastern Note, Professor Bumble, who weeded people out.
Ooh.
I'm not seeing your screen yet, son. Yo,
No,
son,
can you still hear me?
I'm not seeing your screen, son. I can hear you, son, but I can't see your screen, son.
Yeah, something's happened with my screen here. I'm having a slight computer issue.
Uh-oh. You might have to read it after I did all those linguistic exercises.
Yeah, hold on a second. Sorry, listener, having a technical issue. I'm just looking at if you could see my screen, you would see a big fucking white. All right, so I'm gonna have to fix this. Be right back, everybody. You guys will stay here and talk.
Okay.
Interesting.
All right. So, Amber.
Yeah.
Tell me about the town you grew up in. Know what's the name of it again?
Liberty, New York.
Liberty, New York. It's kind of ironic, but
Yeah.
tell me about Liberty. I don't know much about Liberty. Where is that? Upstate? Is that?
Well, we call it upstate, but it's downstate. It's about an hour and a half northwest of New York City.
Okay.
We were known as the Borscht Belt back in the day. That was the Jewish vacation capital of the world. It was
okay.
the Catskill Mountains, which was talked on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We were the home of the movie Dirty Dancing. We were,
really?
Yeah, we were in 1969 home right down the road, 15 minutes away for the Woodstock concert festival. Yeah, that's us as well. And we had hotels where all the major stars back in the day came from. Jerry Lewis, Joan Rivers, Jerry Seinfeld, Sid Caesar, Buddy Hackett, all the old time comedians all got their start up there in the Catskills. And
wow,
very
like a
historic.
comedy circuit up there.
Well, by the time I was born, the whole place went to hell. It was
Okay.
there wasn't much left. There were hundreds and hundreds of hotels, and they all disappeared in the 60s. And I was born after all of that heyday stuff. So,
Okay.
it turned into a place where the inhabitants were mostly deer. There were more deer than people. It was
Really?
Yeah, it was really crazy. It was basically backwoods. When you say New York, we're the opposite of New York City. We were the sticks. We were
Okay.
Most of my friends were self-defining themselves as hicks. That's what they called
It's
themselves.
like the far western suburbs of Chicago, like out by DeKalb and stuff, where it's
Yeah.
very rural and agrarian or whatever.
Yeah, my first job was on a cow farm. I mean, it was
wow.
in the middle, we were in the middle of the hills,
Okay.
Mm.
That's cool. Well, it seems like Dutch has got his shit together.
I'm bad. Well, internet goes. You could have at least stayed on topic and caused me not to have to edit. You fuck bag. Anyway,
We did not have enough tangents in the first segment, so we're gonna go on tangents here.
Ah.
My own devices.
killing me. You're killing me, Smalls. Big Hussein. Go ahead, and this is from Chief Justice Warren of the Supreme Court. Now, as we talked about before, we're talking about Brown versus Board of Education.
Okay.
Big Hussein, read away if you may.
We come then to the question presented. Does segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race even though the physical facilities and other tangible factors may be equal, deprive the students of the minority group of equal educational opportunities. We believe that it does. To separate children from others of similar age and qualifications solely because of their race generates a feeling of inferiority as to their status in the community that may affect their hearts and minds in a way unlikely ever to be undone. That is very fucking profound, by the way. The effect of this separation on their educational opportunities was well stated by a finding in the Kansas case by a court, which is one of the five, by a court which nevertheless felt compelled to rule against the Negro plaintiffs. Segregations of white and colored children in public schools has a detrimental effect upon the colored children. The impact is greater when it is supported by a law. For the policy of separating races is usually interpreted as denoting the inferiority of the Negro group. And by denoting, they mean validating. A sense of inferiority affects the motivation of a child to learn. If you treat people like animals, eventually, for long enough, eventually they will start to act like you treat them. We conclude that in the public space, the doctrine separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. Close quote.
And that is the ruling as read by Chief Justice Warren on the Brown versus Board of Education case. Haas, you read it. Your reflection on that real quick.
It's amazing how, despite that ruling, all those years ago, a lot of those same
Hold on real quick. Hi, Callie. We haven't seen you in so fucking long. Welcome back.
all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Callie, love you, girl. It's amazing how, and this is why a lot of times you hear me say that systemic racism hasn't gone anywhere, it's just evolved. So, in a lot of ways, what happened with this ruling, they were like, okay, so guess what? We can't do it that way, so we'll figure out another way. And that is a perfect segue into the effects of redlining and economic divestment of urban ghettos and how it affects schools. Because still today, the effects of redlining are being shown because a lot of our schools are still very racially segregated. So, and there is still a dichotomy. Even today, we still talk about the dichotomy of resources from impoverished areas to affluent areas, which is an inherent inequality, and it is drawn along the lines of minorities versus the non-minorities in this country. Still today in 2021, and that was what, 1955, right? Brown versus Board of Education. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I'm believing it was 1956, but yeah,
Okay.
right that same period.
So here we are almost 70 years later, and we still have a lot of the same things because the mechanism of the system just morphed into another gear to make the same effects hold true. And Amber, what do you think?
I wasn't sure if you were going to continue there or not. Amber, any thoughts to throw in on that ruling?
Amber's on mute.
Oh, sorry, Amber. We had you on mute there. I apologize. Go ahead.
Okay, I think you're spot on. And a lot of these things are actually purposeful in their intent. And that's the sad part, is that it creates more of a divide and more of a systemic issue that's sort of hidden beneath the surface to create to create this paradigm of us versus them in all regards, and especially, let's be honest here, especially, any person of color, it's an incredible stigmatism, especially for the children. When you start, there were things, I think it was called a doll test. I don't remember. There was so many different things that were that if we look back in history about these psychologists or supposed psychologists that did these experiments, right, on the effects of segregation and whatnot. You look at today and you look at let's do this, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s and 80s. There's not a whole lot of difference there, because even though we were fighting for equality, and on a small scale, there was some equality given, but there was no equity given. And that's the bigger part of this battle, is there's not been any equity put into this. And that's why you saw these people that say, oh, the 1950s were the best ever. For whitey, for the white guy, and for middle class white America, they had their hands poised and ready for, hey, show me the fat stacks. And
it's so funny how
fat stacks and dollar bills.
Nobody had a problem with big government when the big government was
that's the part,
land and things like that.
Yeah, we talked about that the last couple of weeks. It's amazing, isn't it?
That's the covenant, right? It's all that shit. Yeah, there's so much.
Right Act, the
Homestead Act,
the dichotomous implementation of the GI Bill, because a lot of blacks who served and fought for this country came home and still couldn't get into college. And also remember the one of the reasons why, which I didn't put into this, but is true, is I try to keep it short. Is that after the war, after World War II, loans were given out pretty easily pretty loosely to returning veterans, which helped to fund the housing market. Except blacks were not included in that. Nope.
And neither were Latinos. Let's remember, 1 million black Americans served in World War II.
Yeah.
500,000 Latinos served in World War II. And the number of them that were given loans was somewhere around 11% of those people.
Yep.
Where with whites, it was closer to 96%.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And let's not even forget about the federal home loan program that would not insure loans to blacks or minorities.
You are correct.
That's the federal home loan program, which is the precursor to the FHA.
You are correct. So the Brown decision that Haas read was huge, but it didn't lead right to desegregation. In fact, it led to what is known as massive resistance. A resistance
backlash. There's always backlash when there is movement toward equity.
Exactly correct, Big Hussein. And this resistance was so fucking massive that rather than integrate their schools, many cities closed them.
Close the school down.
But of course, they didn't really close them, because states appropriated funds to charter private schools and send whites to those private schools. Now, the Arkansas governor deployed the National Guard to prevent integration at Little Rock Central. Luckily, this prompted President Eisenhower to deploy the 101st Airborne, the Army, in to escort them to school. How long did they escort them for, Dutch, you ask? Maybe a few days. It was an entire year. And remember, what were they using as their method of protest? Confederate flags. So 3 states signaled their heritage, not hate. Well, this goes on that too. 3 states signaled their distaste for the anti-segregation rulings by subsequently, after Brown versus BOE, raising and flying Confederate battle flags over their capitals. But it's not a big deal, right? Let's just fly a Nazi flag over somewhere in Germany right now. Who cares what the Jews think of it? But the most telling of all of the resistance, and this is something that I think we just saw a second coming of culturally, was that after another decade of civil rights battles, all of which we will discuss on future shows. The assassination of Malcolm X. The assassination of Malcolm X.
Getting all
Two
hyped up
Kennedy.
on that Gatorade, man.
Yes, I am hopped up on the Gatorade. Thank you for pointing that out. The assassination of two Kennedys, Dr. King, after riots in Watts and, I think Detroit and New Jersey, after marches, after sit-ins, after organizing, and most of all, after the ultimate victory won by blacks with the signing of historic legislations in 64 and 65, not to mention the rights won by women in 1963 for equal pay, and wins by gays, which of course came a little bit later after the Stonewall incident, which took place in 1969. So that one kind of doesn't count in this, but it does, but it doesn't, because it happened after the backlash, which I'm going to tell you happened right now. Because of all of this stuff that happened, all this organizing, places like the Black Panthers coming into existence, and being more militant in their objections to what was happening, and then everybody diverting into anti-war instead. This turned people were trying to defend their culture. And what did they do after all of this? Remembering the 1950s, remembering the post-war era, they elected a president. And that president ran on a promise to be tough. He promised to promote law and order.
Law and order.
And he promised
split heads.
Yes. And he spoke of a return to normalcy like that I mentioned. And that, of course, was Richard Nixon. And what I find so profound here is how history has somewhat repeated itself, because still we look back and we want to say, think about how great it was in 1956 with Frankie Valli and, Annette Funicello and, Ricky Valens and, the Big Bopper and all these guys who were so, and I'm not taking anything away from people like Elvis or, Chubby Checker, or any of these guys, but they looked and they said, oh, blacks, look, we like Chubby Checker. We like Little Richard. They're
black, but they're not black though.
Yeah, they're not black. Exactly. We like the guys in the end, who are playing in the NBA and that sort of thing. Jackie Robinson came to prominence during this time. Let's not forget about Jackie Robinson, because to me, one of the biggest civil rights icons that there are is Jackie Robinson.
But
yeah,
he wasn't even the 10th best player in the Negro Leagues.
No, he was the most suitable for moving over,
because
mentality-wise,
they knew that he would also.
I'm not sure I agree with the fact that he wasn't the top. There was a couple players they said were better, but he was pretty fucking good.
Oh, he was good. I'm not saying that. It just goes to show. Anyway, he had the most suitable temperament to endure.
And he was younger.
What was to come, and he was younger, because Satchel Paige, man. Oh,
Satchel Paige was ridiculous.
Oh my God. Anyway, what could have been?
Yeah. So when you hear this, Amber, and when you hear about how, again, I didn't talk about Martin Luther King. I didn't talk about Rosa Parks. I didn't talk about, the Freedom Rides or the Mississippi bus boycott.
I'm glad you didn't talk about MLK and Rosa Parks, because
we hear about that all the time.
MLK's his comments are cherry picked. His stance on guns, his stance on violence is cherry picked, and it doesn't talk about violence as self-defense, which his and Malcolm X's beliefs aligned when they talked about self-defense, especially of your home and things of that nature. So, Rosa Parks, MLK, those are the how do I say this? When we talk about Black history, those are the go-tos, because those are the ones that seem to promote a little docility, and they don't want to talk about or promote those. Just like the Bible, the slave Bible was different than the slave owner's Bible. people like to talk about those civil rights leaders and icons that promoted nonviolence, even in the face of violence to their home and to their children and things of that nature. But they don't want to talk about those people that said, you hit that motherfucker back, or you protect your home by all means necessary. And they don't want to talk about also Malcolm X after he came back from Mecca, when he said, you know what, I went out there and I was walking with Muslims with white skin, and I realized that I was wrong.
Yeah, the Nation of Islam did not care for that at all. Yeah,
not at all, because he went to Mecca and received some enlightenment, and like I try to do, and like any strong person will try to do, in the presence of new information, what did he do? He changed his position. And that was so important. And when MLK started talking about economic empowerment as the next phase of the civil rights movement, that's when he got shot in the neck.
That's when he got shot. So that's exactly correct. Amber, I did want to go to you real quick. We see what happened with Trump. We saw what happened with Nixon. Talk about how the similarities of what you've seen that blacks went through and Hispanics went through and gays went through and women even went through with the election of Richard Nixon, trying to harken back to a more golden time. How did you see Trump aligning with that? And tell us how it sort of struck you and affected you personally.
So when he started saying this really ridiculous term that we all know, "Make America Great Again,"
oh, God.
You know, I started immediately, you know, being that I'm in the public light a lot, I started coming out with agitating comments to people, and I would say to them, "Okay, make America great again. Okay, so what metric are you attributing the word great? And then furthermore, what era or what period of time are you attributing the word again? Because I can name any part in American history and pre-America when we came over here to supposedly, you know, become a free nation, but we slaughtered 4.5 million indigenous people to do it. Those savages, as we outline in the
89%.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And so when you pose that question to these folks like that, you know, there's a lot of people that have always been left out of the mix. The minority, the marginalized, you know, the people that didn't fit that mainstream white America sort of look. I hate saying that, but it's the truth, you know, because when I say it, people don't want to believe it. They have cognitive dissonance over it. It's sort of like when I say, like, I might piss you guys off right now. There's something actually called, toxic masculinity. Okay. Mm-hmm. But a lot of guys just don't have it in them to actually admit that exists. Right. So when we look at Donald Trump trying to do what he was doing, it affected a lot of people because it's a myth. It's a myth that you can go back to some better time, because the one thing that's guaranteed on this planet, on this 3D rock, is that things are going to keep moving forward. You know, there is no yesterday. You can't get back to something because it's an illusion. It doesn't exist anymore. The only thing that exists is one. It's the present. The future doesn't exist. The past doesn't exist. It's just the present exists. And with that, I thought the entire, you know, inflammatory sort of rhetoric that he was doing, I kind of think he was really, I don't know, I think he had a personal issue with transgender people, because he actually spent more time, an inordinate amount of time, attacking transgender people and equality in the trans community. You know, forget the LGBTQ, the whole spectrum of people that fall within that. Isolate just the transgender people out of there, and he had over 78 different executive orders that went through, you know, dismantling. You know, you've probably heard, "We will not be erased." I'm sure you've heard it. Everybody says that about transgender people. We will not be erased. That comes from Donald Trump. The reason we came up with "we will not be erased" is because starting in his first month of pregnancy, God,
pregnancy of ignorance.
yeah. So, you know, the first the first part of his presidency, I guess it's just hard for me to say presidency and Donald Trump in the same sentence. I'm sorry. So the first part of this presidency, he started to dismantle the word transgender out of every federal website and document starting in the Health and Human Services Department. So when you go back in time, you start to see that he started eradicating that word everywhere. And then he brought on Ben Carson. Here's somebody that's supposed to speak to the black community, right? And he does not speak for the, thank you for that middle finger. That's perfectly said. Well said,
dude.
Yeah, he is just a complete.
And Clarence Thomas.
Yeah, they're
all
all
goddamn light-skinned preacher.
Yeah, they are
and
just
the Hodge twins and Candace Owens. I'm sorry.
You know, you're right. And you know, and then you have him on C-SPAN live, you know, saying, well, transgender people are just a bunch of bearded men in dresses, you know, which is really dangerous to do because
Amber, I don't see your beard. I mean, what the heck?
I don't know what the hell
he must be right. He has to be right. He's a doctor.
And 48% of people that are transgender are actually assigned female at birth and are actually men, right? So he's sort of like put himself in this weird, you know, him and Ben Shapiro. I'd love to get them both in a room and argue with them. I mean, I do have a platform at this point. You know, I may not have a huge platform like they do, but it's certainly growing. And I would welcome any day to argue with either of those two people because they're easy to tear apart. If you actually look at what they say and what they do, you'd see that they're really not that intelligent. They're just intelligent in they don't let you get a word in edgewise, you know?
Well, remember.
And they name called and they do all the D's that Dutch talks about.
Well, remember that Ben Shapiro challenged Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to a debate, and she's accused him of catcalling. I believe was the term that he used. And she's like, I'm not going to just debate you because you say you want to. So Ben Shapiro then ripped on her for that and basically said she was stupid for turning down his debate request. So he cannot refuse your request because then, of course, he would be succumbing to the same hypocrisy that he is.
Well, let me tell you something interesting that happened this week. I called out. We have a very popular radio station here in Tampa.
Yes, tell us about that. I saw that on Twitter, please.
Yeah. So one morning, and you know what? I want to first, in case they're listening, Mike Calta and the entire Mike Calta show. I have mad love and respect for these people. I think they do a fabulous job. I've been listening to them faithfully for 10 years. So I'm not angry with them, but I do think there's a level of ignorance that's well beyond what they think they have. And one morning on Monday, I was driving after 8:30. It must have been 8:30-ish. And I turned on the station and I start listening to them talking about them transgendered people. And remember earlier in our podcast, we said, don't change an adjective into a noun because it turns us into an it. Right. Yeah. It's the othering sort of stuff. So I was sort of taken back, but I was like, all right, you know what? That's just a slip. You know, I'll let that be. And then both of them, and I want to make sure that I'm accurate so they don't sue me. You know, I believe it was Mike Calta and somebody named Galvin started talking about how, you know, these people looked good as guys or dudes, they called them. And why would they do that to themselves? Because, boy, they got a long way to go if they think they look good. As if we're in a freaking sort of beauty pageant. This is all about being in a beauty pageant, right? I worked the Miss America pageant for 6 years. This is not about a beauty pageant for me. And, you know, I am who I am. You know, attractive, unattractive, I don't really give a shit. I am who I am. I'm just a human being. And when they sort of relegated people like me to this object of they're just making a decision, an arbitrary decision to dress up a certain way or something, which has absolutely nothing to do with being transgender. It sort of threw me, and you know, like a bitter, angry wife or a girlfriend, you know, guys, you've been in relationships and you've pissed your girlfriend off and she gets mad at you, right? And you're like, oh shit, I better watch myself. And then a half hour later, y'all are kissy face and everything's fine. That's the way I view that whole thing with Mike Calta. I got pissed off. I went to Twitter. The shit went viral, right? There's this little Twitter war going on. And you know, the thing is I wasn't mad at them, but the way I worded it, I can see that they thought I was angry with them. In some ways, I was angry because they
thought you were triggered.
Yeah, and what ended up happening is when you read their responses, they were actually the ones that were triggered because little old me really got under their skin by calling them out on that. And so what I decided to do is go the better route and say, listen, I'm not angry with you guys. I made this a public statement. I think you saw it. I'm not angry with you guys. I actually listen to your show all the time. But I think this is a learning moment. It's a teaching moment. And, you know, for Mike to say to me personally, hey, you know, you just got me wrong. I'm not like that. Bullshit. We're all like that. I make mistakes. And I'm strong enough woman to say I make mistakes. He has to be a strong enough man to say, listen, I've been married. I don't even know how long he's been married. Let's just make a year up, 18 years. And you know what? I don't think him and his wife have had a kumbaya moment all 18 years. They must have had arguments or disagreements during that period of time. No doubt. Everybody does. Otherwise, you're just not human. So Mike and I had that moment the other day. And it's a passing moment. It's fleeting. I like Mike. I have much respect for Mike. I would never badmouth him. I think he tries to learn certain things. I think there's things he doesn't understand, and he is willing to learn. He's open-minded, but he messed up on that day. And I wanted to call him and Galvin out for that. And they want me to be on their show, but I'm telling them right here and now if they're listening to you guys, and I don't know if they are. I know that you called them.
Highly unlikely.
It's highly unlikely, but if they hear this, I want them to know that, you know, I've come a long way in my life, and I'm not one of those call-in people. I'm not one of those people that calls in on the telephone and you hang up with in 2 seconds. If you want to have me on your show, then you have me on as a respectable, you know, guest. I've earned that in my career. I'm not just some call-in person, you know, from you know, wherever you work, you know, hey, I'm calling in today. You guys are doing a great job, blah, blah, blah. No, I've earned myself, you know, credit to be a reliable guest on a show. I know how to talk. I'm an intelligent woman. You know, I'm not the smartest, you know, individual ever. I don't claim to be, but you know what? I like to have a teaching moment with people because a lot of people have had teaching moments with me. And those are the people I learned from. I learned something every day. And I think the day I stop learning something from someone else is the day I drop dead. So I think they could learn something about this too. So I called them out. They're pissed off over it. They're, you know, half of Tampa sort of hates on me because, you know, how dare you call them out? They're perfect. But, you know, they made the world a little bit more dangerous that day for transgender people because they turned us into objects that are making some frivolous, arbitrary decision in our lives. And that's just not what happened. And Callie, thank you so much. I love you. That was nice of you to say.
Yeah, I saw that. And let me just say this real quick. Like, I am the poster child for playing counterpoint. And I know it pisses people off. And honestly, I really don't give a fuck. But you have to be able to, you know, sort of arm yourself with things that are true and things that are relevant from people's experiences. And a lot of times you're not going to get that unless you ask them difficult questions, right? So that doesn't mean that I think I'm right. That doesn't mean that I think you're wrong. But if there is something that makes sense, I'll bring that up and I'll try to defend why I bring it up in the first place. What I saw that was happening there was I saw that it looked like Mike, and I'm not from Tampa. I don't listen to this show, so I don't know him from
I think they have like a listener base of 3.5 million. I mean, it's a huge.
Yeah, I'm not from there, never. So yeah. I'm sure you're right. I'm sure you're right. And so your mic popped there for a second.
He was Howard Stern's buddy.
Was he? Okay. I thought he was like from Mancow or some shit. That would piss him off, by the way. And by the way, what we'll do is when I post this, I will tag him to it on Twitter, and then he'll get your invitation. But what really pissed me off, though, Amber, was not really him so much as his listeners.
Yeah, it's his listeners. It's not.
And
Mike's a good guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you have, I want to use the term peanut gallery, but I won't because it's a bad term. So I need a different term for that to come into my lexicon. But when you have the side room of people egging you on, and echoing your point, when it comes to things that are opinion, like Mikey and I will argue about atheism, and the folks in the chat here will say, Jason Dutch, you're wrong. Jason Dutch, you're wrong. Well, that's an opinion, right? Like, I'm not mad at Mikey because he's an atheist. He's not mad at me because I'm not an atheist. I'm not mad at anybody because they're not an atheist.
Right.
But when it comes to things like, giving someone an opportunity, you're here because I think Haas and I have been waiting for 2 years to have someone on like yourself, because we want to be able to learn from you. We want to be able to say, here, this is the predetermined mindset that I have. This is why I felt it was justified. This is where I heard it from. This is the context for it. Tell me what your opinion is on this. And then we can make up our own minds as to whether or not we want to take that or not. I would say 95% of what you said today, I think, is probably something that I'll try to adopt. But with these folks, what really irritated me, and I think Haas will probably have something to add to this, is that when you're so set in your ways that you're and then you're getting egged on by people who are telling you that you're right, and that you, Amber, are the one who is just out of it, and you're triggered and you're making a big deal out of nothing and that sort of thing. It puts the topic off to the side. This happened all the time with Black Lives Matter, sometimes on purpose with shit like, they're witches, and other times with things like where they conflate it with black on black crime and that sort of stuff. So I really believe that they need to have you come on the show and just have a candid conversation about why they feel the way that they feel, justify it, go ahead and say that, and then let you rebut it. Because if you don't do that, you're really being dishonest to the conversation. At Big House, I can see you trying to talk.
Yeah, but I am not going to go on their show unless I'm an actual guest. I've already in my life. I'm not just some call-in person. I'm a goddamn public figure also. So, don't treat me like some guy on his cell phone, or some lady on her cell phone, or some kid from Orlando calling into your show as a fan.
Right.
I'm just, I'm a different type of caliber person. I'm not putting myself on a pedestal. It's just, I've earned that respect, and it took me a long friggin' time in my career to get there. And, if you're going to do that, have me on as a real guest, have a little courtesy to extend to me, because I think that the Tampa community will learn something. And I think Mike and us can have a lot of fun, because I have a lot of respect for Mike. And I think once he gets to really know who I am, and I think he knows a little more from our private conversation that we had, he'll have me on, and we'll have a lot of fun on the program, because I don't just talk about this. I don't take myself completely serious. You know what I mean? I can self-deprecate just like anyone else. Oh,
I love doing that. It's easy to do.
It's easy to do, and you just, when you make light of that and you show that, I don't have my soldiers on one side of the field and you have yours on the other, and we start firing. That's just not the way I operate. And one of the listeners that you might have seen on there said, "Wow, you are ridiculously nice," he said to me. And he said, I can't help but to like you, and I hope you call into the I think he called it the Cowhead Show, and I hope you call in and tomorrow. And I talked to my publicist, and she said, "No, you're not calling in tomorrow. You're not a call-in caller. If they want to do this, they can come through me, and we can schedule a time you can be on the show. Or that if you want to do it, hun, go right ahead. But don't go on the show just to be in some call thing, because then they have you. And if they want to make you look bad, they just hang up on you. But if you're a true guest and they've actually marketed you as a guest, that's a whole different scenario. You know what I mean?"
Right. Yeah. So they can't talk to you for 30 seconds, 4 minutes, whatever it is, and then they respond to you and debunk you, so to speak, after you hang up
Yeah, because it's dangerous. I have a life, I have a family, and I'm not going to be put in harm's way because they have an axe to grind. Listen, Mike is one of those people that is willing to learn. He told me so, and I keep saying it over and over. I don't have a problem with Mike. I actually don't have a problem with Galvin either. I think Galvin just doesn't understand it either, and he's actually a very funny comedian. Galvin is hysterical. He writes some stuff on. I've lived in a lot of cities, from New York to Nashville. I've spent a lot of time in Los Angeles, Hollywood, and San Francisco area. And let me tell you, out of all these areas, I think this show that he has is brilliantly done. I think it's really, really spot on. And that's why they have such a great listener base. But sometimes they get something wrong, and somebody can come along and do it. And then somebody said, oh, looks like somebody's looking to get publicity for their book. And I said, to that person, I responded, because I don't respond to those people. Like you were talking about his fans. I don't respond to that. It's just not healthy to do. So that one I decided to, and I said, listen, if Mike wants to talk to me privately and never mention my name on the air at all, I'm happy to have a private conversation with him and his crew just to explain where they went ass backwards on everything they were talking about, and actually creates a danger for people like me that actually have a family.
Right.
Because there are a lot of sickos out there. I wrote a book. It went international. It went number 2 on the bestsellers list. And then all of a sudden you're in front of millions of people, and the weirdos come out and they start saying, I'll just name a few of them, and I'm not singling out any religion or anything. These are actual word for word things that were said to me in some of the comments. Here we go. Let's see. You disgust Allah. You do not deserve to live.
Wow.
You disgust Allah. You do not deserve to live. Here's one. You have fallen away from Jesus Christ. Oh, where is that? Hold on. I just lost it. It scrolled on me. Oh, where is it? You have fallen away from Jesus.
These people are not. These people do not represent religion in the way that it's that these people are fucking assholes. I mean, they do represent religion, but they're such assholes. They use it as the sleeve of fucking, just being so pure, and it's so fucking irritating to me. I'm sorry.
It bother me. I have to move on.
It bothers me so much that I can't even express it to you, because it makes it very difficult to even go to church when you have to sit around people who use their religion as a suit of armor to pretend that they are without any fault. Fuck you. Right? Like it's so fucking nauseating to me when people do this. And I will defend you to this point. Not defend. Well, you don't even need defense, but I'm going to advocate for you here, because I saw the first tweet. You did not ask to go on their show. You said you guys need some training.
Yeah.
That's all you said.
Yeah.
Was that you need some, I think you might have said diversity or I don't remember exactly.
And inclusion training. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. That's all you said. And you said that you'd be happy to talk to them, about it. You didn't invite yourself on the show.
Correct. Yeah. I have no desire. I don't listen. My book's all over the world. I'm all over the world with this stuff. I really don't need any publicity from their radio show, although it's nice to have your hometown embrace who you are. I think I could teach a lot of people in the Tampa area. Shameless plug. Chapter 3 of this book, Hiding from
Get her off the screen. No.
Chapter 3 of the book, I go into losing my religion, which we talked about in the first segment, which actually rips apart the mythology that Christianity has put in the mainstream about gay people and transgender people. And I've actually shown in a logical way, because I've studied all religions for 32 years.
Have you?
Yes, I have been my whole adult life. Because I was so disenfranchised. Remember the whole, hey, you need an exorcism bullshit that I went through? Yeah. And I had 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 exorcisms attempted on me, not by my family, by the way, either. I had a beautiful family. I'm one of the lucky people. I'm blessed. I have a beautiful family that's always loved me, but people tried to do that shit to me. And, in the book, what I do is I explain that I have read the translated Quran. I have read the Codex Sinaiticus. I think we talked about it in the first segment.
We did, yeah.
I have read, the old Jewish texts. I've read the Old Testament. I've read the New Testament King James. I've read the New Testament NIV. I've read the New Testament New Living Testament. I've read all of these different things, including Hinduism. I've studied Buddhism, which is sort of a religion and a way of life, not totally a religion. There's 4,200 religions, and there's 33,000 different denominations of Christianity, right? So I've spent a lot of time in my life making sure I get this shit right when I'm talking about it.
Do you speak Greek?
I wish I could, because I know that a lot of the translations of that is in Greek, and unfortunately, I don't speak.
Okay, I was wondering.
I have friends that speak Greek. So up in New York, two of my best friends that owned a Greek restaurant, actually, unfortunately, they're not my friends anymore because, I said something bad about Donnie. And that's a tragic thing when that happens.
Wow.
The guy was attacking people like me.
There's
and
snowflakes.
Yeah, it was just too bad. All right. I still love them, though. But the thing is that I was able to properly dismantle everything and show that this text, which everybody, you've all heard this, it's the instruction manual for all humanity, right? We've all heard that saying. Yeah, the Bible is the instruction manual for all humanity. Oh, really? So why does
government? It's the basis for morality.
So the 450 square mile piece of shit land that they talk about is really the compass for all of humanity. How come we don't hear about the redwood trees in California that predate Jesus Christ? They're still alive in California. These are trees that are 2,500 years old. We don't hear about that. Where's the Rocky Mountains? Where's Antarctica? Where's New Zealand? Where's Australia? Where's everything? Where's everything else for that matter? We hear about the Red Sea. We hear about palm trees, fig trees, and oh God, I'm having a brain fart right in the middle of all this. But we hear about the desert and whatnot, and all you hear about is what these people saw, and these men only saw that part of the earth, so that was the earth. And then when you look at the commandments, there's some commandments about slavery. Not commandments, but the book of Leviticus, especially.
Oh, my favorite.
Yeah, the book of Leviticus is absolutely evil, and so
horrendous.
Deuteronomy is the same way, right?
And let's not leave Judges out.
Oh, God in heaven!
Let's take my wife out. Let someone rape her, chop her into little pieces, and bring her home so that her hand is still on the doorknob. That's a great book to put in the Bible.
Yeah. So I talk about how quote unquote Christians are the biggest cherry pickers of all time, and they're and then they come up with excuses why they're allowed to cherry pick, and it's just silly. And then I do this to them just to screw with their heads. All right, everybody, on the count of 3, whether you're in the audience or whether you're here, tell me who the first 2 people on the planet were. Go. Don't think about it. Tell me the first 2 people on the planet. Go. Say it, guys.
It's a myth, so no, I'm not going to say it.
Just say the myth. Yeah, let's call
Adam
it
and Eve.
Adam and Eve, right? Did you know Eve was not the first woman on the planet? Her name was Lilith.
It was Lilith. Yeah.
Lilith was actually the first.
You and I speak the same language, just so you know. Like, this is my passion.
Yeah, this is my kung fu, baby.
Yeah. In fact, Lilith is the inspiration for what's Niles' wife's name in Frasier.
Oh, Frasier, yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
They named her after and Lilith is supposed to be a demon these days, but
she's a succubus. Yeah, she's yeah. So I mean, it's all of it's rooted in mythology, but I mean, if you're gonna go on that, let's just go ahead with it all the way and say let's call the myth real and say the first 2 people were this or that. Big effing deal at that point, because it doesn't matter. Because if you think about it, all you ladies out there, think about this too. All through history, we've lived in a patriarchy, a misogynistic patriarchy at that, where everything in religion, which becomes everything in society, becomes male dominated. God is a he. We've engendered God as a he, not as a she. And you know what? God is none of those things. God is light. God is, you know, God is just this other vibration, or maybe we're just part of God. Who knows what the hell it is? But to say it's a human sort of thing is sort of a silly thing. And then Jesus Christ, of course, is a male, and we don't hear about the fact that Jesus was probably married and had a lineage, because that would give power to women in the church, because women were not allowed to talk in the Bible. It even says so. I even outline it in here. They're not allowed to talk. And don't even get me started with slavery. I actually bring out quotes about slavery in this book that shows how ridiculous it is. And did you know that if you, and what's that word you're using all the time? Pause?
Yes.
I'm going to have a pause moment, but I'm going to go full bore on this one. If you have intercourse when a woman's having her period, you are defiling nature, and you are to be shunned from your whole community. You are to be shunned permanently from your community because you have exposed her flow, is actually the words in the Bible. You've exposed her flow, and you are to be cast out from your community. I don't see a lot of people doing, and I wouldn't have very many friends that were,
I gotta move.
No, I was on mute. I didn't even realize I was on mute there. That's a Levitical law, and the woman is put to death, if I'm remembering correctly, and the guy is chastised. It's like here's an interesting story from the Bible for you. And again, I'm someone who I love the figure of Jesus Christ. But don't confuse that with religion, with being evangelical or loving religion. Yeah. But here's my wife is a big Christian, and she was talking about something the other day, and I was like, about how the Bible isn't really sexist, and she doesn't really pay that much attention, but it's fine. She said what she said about, the women were treated very well in the Bible. And I was like, look at Judah. Okay. Judah, and I'm sure Amber, you know where I'm going. Yeah. Judah went out into the city or the fields one day, and he met, there was this whole thing with his daughter-in-law so his daughter-in-law was Tamar, and Tamar, her husband, who was Judah's oldest son, died. And then his second son was supposed to fuck her and have a kid by her, but instead of coming inside of her, sorry to use graphic terms, but he did it on the floor.
Yeah.
And God struck him down. The third son refused to do it. So Tamar goes out into the fields and dresses herself up as a harlot, aka a hooker. Judah sees her on his way somewhere, I forget where, it's been ages since I read this verse, and says, "Oh, can I bang you?" She's like, "Yeah, give me a goat." And he's like, "Oh, I don't have a goat right now." She's like, "Well, instead of giving me the goat, give me your staff." And some other shit, some tchotchkes he had.
Some tchotchkes.
Oh,
yeah. So here's the moral of the story. He bangs her, gets her pregnant. And the Bible says, I love how the Bible, when they talk about that, he went into her and she begot him a son. It happened at the same time. I don't understand why they write, but so he bangs her, and then 3 minutes later she has a son. He finds out later that weeks later, that Tamar had pretended to be a hooker, had banged some guy, and had a kid. He says, "Bring her to me that we may kill her." And I forget if they were going to dismember her or burn her. I don't recall. But she comes to him and she said, "It's your baby." He's like, "Fuck you, bitch. Ain't my baby." He said, "It wasn't me."
Yeah.
"Wasn't me." She said, "Whose staff is this?"
Gotcha, bitch.
Okay, it's my kid, so we'll let her live. It's fine. It's fine. Come back into the house. What does that tell you? That tells you how much that in the Old Testament, throw the whole thing out. Hebrews 8, the old law is dead. throw the whole fucking book out. There are some good things in the New Testament, but the bad outweighs it 30-1. It's garbage. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So
I read the translated Quran, and I've read the Old Testament. And I got to tell you,
the Quran's no walk in the park either.
They both suck, but they,
fuck the Quran.
They both, to each point that they try to make, they both have some really good passages. There were some good authors, right? Sure. But for the most part, there's a lot of evil shit in both of them. And what's funny is in post 9/11 America, Americans were trained to just arbitrarily put all Muslims in a box, and this is what you are because kill the infidel. They cherry picked something out of the Quran, and I found a lot of disdain in all of the communities here for that, and I was like, well, what a hypocrite you are! You're a Christian, calling them out for wanting to kill the infidel, but you say thou shalt not kill. And then in the book of Leviticus alone and Deuteronomy and Judges, you give about 72 loopholes to kill your own kid if you want to. So it's just it's enough to make me want to drop a bunch of Xanax and go to sleep.
Homosexuality is an abomination to God, but so is wearing clothing of two cloths, and so is shellfish. Verses apart from each other, maybe a half a chapter away from each other. It calls them both abominations. So that's fine. Let's pretend that you're right. Let's pretend they are abominations to God. Why then do we focus so much on homosexuality and not on Red Lobster? I'm wondering why
the biscuits be hitting.
This is the case. Amber, I love you. We got to get rolling. We got one more thing we got to do. I want you to come back and talk about religion. I'm trying to put together a super panel for religion. You sound like someone would be great to be on it. We also want to talk about the segregation in the Black church one day, but obviously we're going to have Pastor Isaac Lindsay on for that. I know Haas is excited because he liked talking to Pastor Lindsay that day. So Haas, close us out. And then after Haas gives his final thoughts, actually, let's do it this way. I apologize. Amber, before Haas gives his final thoughts, and I'd like you to talk about A. Philip Randolph if if you're educated on him when you do your final thoughts. But Amber, if you would tell everybody, where can they find you? Where can they get your book? How can they stalk and harass you, that sort of thing, and send you, dismembered kittens and stuff like that?
My website is actually amberrosewashington.com. And you can find out all sorts of information about me on there. My book is on sale everywhere where books are sold. Apparently, most people do it through Amazon these days. But right now, for this week, because my book has reached number 2 on the bestsellers list, my publisher is offering the ebook, the Kindle version, for just $1. The paperback book is still the same price, but there's an ebook special they're offering. And we're pushing the book out to people just so they can have it. And I think it's a beautiful thing my publisher's doing. I mean, I'm not in it for the money, right? If I was, then I would say hell no to the publisher because I got to split all this stuff with everyone, right? And
Let me split this dollar 3 ways.
Yeah, right. So it's just amberrosewashington.com. The book is at amazon.com. The name of the book is Hiding from Myself, My Complicated Rebirth into Womanhood and My Own Skin.
And your Twitter?
I don't even know. My Twitter account, just look me up, Amber Rose Washington. I think it's Twitter. Do you have it there? Did I say
I do. I don't have Twitter up, but follow when I send the audio out for this later, at Dutch Jason, if you're following me, or if you're following Dig at Dig on America, you will see Amber's Twitter in a number of hours. So we will get that out to you guys. So Haas, as usual. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Does anyone have a comment on Texas real quick? So we did want to talk about this for a second. I just want to say this. I really feel shitty about everything that's been happening out there. I'm going to make this real brief. These people out there in my thoughts and prayers and all that type of stuff. And we're going to make some donations to try to help out from the podcast to Texas. Kudos to Beto O'Rourke for what the fuck he was doing. Fuck you to Ted Cruz for getting on a plane and driving off or flying off to Cancun because you're a good fucking dad. Go fuck yourself. Fuck you to the Public Utilities Commission and to Gridley, who tried to pretend they were the good guys and then said they still want their money from the government. It's just a shit show. Haas, any thoughts on that? It's deregulation, man. But I've been wanting to talk about this for 2 weeks. I apologize.
Right, so real quick. My thoughts are: notice, if you will, how the right immediately started spouting nonsense about this whole thing being caused by the windmills.
Yeah, false.
You know what I mean? And how they immediately tried to tie what happened in Texas to the Green New Deal. And this is an example of how the Green New Deal would do for everybody else. When in fact,
yeah, thank you for pointing this out.
This happened a decade ago, almost to the day. They had hearings about it and said that they needed to fix certain things, but they left it up to the businesses to. It's like it's an option. It's not Pirates of the Caribbean, but that's how they acted like it was. Like it was just a guideline. Hey, it'd be really nice if you could winterize these windmills and take steps so if this happens again.
Not only the windmills, the coal, the nuclear, everything.
Yeah. If you would take steps to make sure that your shit wouldn't shut down when it gets below 30 degrees, that would be great. But if not, you do what you want. We're on a separate grid because we want to save a few shekels and increase profits for our stockholders a little bit.
And Jerry Jones.
And everything. So, no, we're going to go right to, no, this is what happens. Look at those windmills supplied every bit of power to all of the homes in Texas that were affected, when in fact it's like 10 or 11%. The politicization via disinformation and false information, exactly, Callie. It's all AOC's fault.
Good.
Fucking AOC.
That is good. Oh, I love that.
So yeah, that's my thought on that is like the way that the right just immediately jumped to politicize this and make it a part of the Green New Deal and why the Green New. It's almost like they did with what was
she went in ninja style. AOC.
Solyndra. It's like they did with Solyndra, and they said, "See, since Solyndra failed, like most businesses fail, that means that all of these businesses are going to fail." And that so that's just my quick thought on that.
She had AOC snuck in with the ninja suit on. Had Ilhan Omar like being the tech person, like turn left here. Yeah,
she was Ethan Hunt.
Yeah,
funny.
And they not only that, they didn't winterize anything.
No, nothing. Because there's no cold in Texas at all.
Right. And here's the killer. You're so pro individualism, right? Mm-hmm. Not only did they not invest money and save money, not only did they lay people off whenever the price of gas went down for the last 12 years and make money, not only did they raise their rates to historic highs and make money, and we're not even talking about this $9,000 thing. I'm talking about before that. Mm-hmm. And now guess who's going to bail them out? The fucking government's going to bail them out. They're going to get more money. Oh, but we don't like government in Texas. We're about
you don't like big government until big government is turning their pockets out for you.
We don't want welfare unless it's
corporate welfare.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Big Haas.
People don't want to talk about corporate welfare and how that's a much bigger slice of the pie than any other type of welfare there's out there.
Absolutely. That's going to be a topic one day. So Amber, thank you again. Big Hoss, are you familiar at all with A. Philip Randolph?
Not really. But what
Okay,
I was
I would like people to go research this guy. I was hoping to do a focus on him today, but A. Philip Randolph was really big with trying to end employment discrimination, especially in the defense industry. He was a civil rights leader. He had a lot to do with trying to fix the military and segregation in the armed forces, and in fact was successful in a lot of that. So if you're not familiar with A. Philip Randolph, he is really one of the, I guess they're called oftentimes the hidden figures, like that movie was called when it comes to that type of stuff. So he's somebody that for Black History Month, if you want to look into someone who's a little bit more obscure, A. Philip Randolph was, I mentioned him at the beginning of my lesson, not lesson, but my taking it back, as Mikey calls it today. And definitely worth looking into. Real man of genius. And Big Hoss, your closing statement.
I've got something for you.
But I want to in keeping with Black History Month and as a mechanism for illustrating well, there's been talk of reparations, and there's always talk of let's do a study into reparations for the descendants of slaves, et cetera, et cetera. And people say, well, how do we even know how do we even know how much that's even worth, da, 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 da. Well, there's a book, and I think that everybody should read it because people tend to understand things a lot better when you attach dollar values to it. And there's a book called The Black Tax, and I'm making a comment about it right now. I'm going to put it up for people that are watching. Called The Black Tax: The Cost of Being Black in America. Okay, and 59 trillion is actually it's a median estimate because the estimate is actually between 37 trillion and 97 trillion. And people say, well, let's put it in the middle and just say 57 to 60 million. I mean trillion. And there's this book by Sean Rochester, like Rochester, New York.
Real quick, are you Irish Swede? Are you referring to, because 59 million, 59 I think trillion. that is two numbers. That is, I believe that is, because I'm not sure what he's referring to here. If he's referring to what you're talking about and what reparations would be, because the number I came up with when I figured this out was about 10 trillion. But we'll go over the math to that one day. But the it comes to about $135,000 per person. But the plus investment in community. But I believe that might be a corporate welfare number, because I believe that is about the same number that is estimated, if you count inflation, that we have given in corporate welfare since like the 1830s, when they started giving away land and everything like that, if they valued it today. So if you can clarify that number. But anyway, I digress. Go ahead. I'm sorry for jumping in.
Oh, I'm putting in the comments here the name of the book and the author. But there's also a corresponding video that kind of gives the highlights and a slideshow. It's in lecture format, but it's very enlightening and interesting when you see the values put onto the value of the slave, the value of the work that they did, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then also talking about present day taxes on the Black community and things of that nature, and how innovation was hamstrung because of certain things of discrimination and things like that. And so go on YouTube. It's called The Black Tax: The Cost of Being Black in America by Sean Rochester. There's a YouTube video, but the book goes into much more detail. I'm using that as my closing comments because I feel like when we're just throwing out stuff, throwing out terms, reparations and things like that, and people don't understand they don't understand the value of what the slaves did in building this country. You know, it's 1619. Anyway, read the book, watch, or at least watch the video on YouTube. Let us know what you think. This dude spent like 15 to 20 years researching to write this book. It's very good, and I think that it will serve to enlighten willing minds and give them some basis to talk to other people who just poo-poo the idea of reparations and things like that, even though we've given reparations to everybody except the descendants of slaves. Be good to each other. Peace.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining the show. We will see you. Yes, we've watched Amistad. Oh, I thought you said Amistad. Sorry, Callie. Amend. No, I have not.
Like 5 times to cry.
Yeah, I don't have my glasses on. Amber, thank you again for being on the show. We loved it.
Yes, thanks so much. We loved you.
Well, thank
Gotta
you so
come
much
back.
for having me.
Come
This was a lot of fun, guys. You guys are hysterical and smart, so I like that.
Who?
Thank you so much.
Who are you talking to?
I don't know anymore. It's 2:30 in the morning. I don't know.
Oh, you're talking to Big Hoss, not me. Please come back and promise you'll come back. Can we see you again?
I promise I'll come back. You guys are fun, and
Please don't make me come to Tampa.
Yeah. Don't make me come down there.
You gotta find out what happens.
I'm not going to Tampa.
You gotta find out what happens with that little drama that's happening. It's we'll see what happens, what comes out of that.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that and tweet that out. So thanks everyone for watching. Again, if you want to support this show, you can do so by going to Patreon, patreon.com/dig on America. And if you're watching us on Facebook right now, Callie, subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/dig on America, and watch us there, because someday we might get money for actually doing this shit. Someday, some glorious day.
And Callie, and the rest of you, go ahead and friend request me if you want. It's nice to meet you too.
You're a lying dog faced pony soldier.
All right, guys. Thank you for watching the show. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Big Hoss. Mikey, feel well, brother. We love you. We miss you. We hope you come back, kind of. So we'll talk to you guys next week.
Bye.